Yes, doctor, we can start now.
Okay. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السادة الحضور، نهنئكم ابتداء بانقضاء عيد الفطر المبارك، من قبله صوم شهر رمضان الكريم. تقبل الله منا ومنكم صالح الأعمال، ونرحب بكم في ندوة جديدة من الندوات التي تنظمها أكاديمية نسيج عبر الإنترنت، والتي نتناول فيها موضوع كيف تعزز إدارة المعرفة تميز المؤسسة ونجاحها. وتنبع أهمية هذه الندوة وكما يشي بها عنوانها من إبرازها للقيمة التي تحققها إدارة المعرفة بالنسبة للمؤسسات على اختلاف أنواعها، والتي تتراوح ما بين تبسيط العمليات وخفض التكاليف عن طريق التخلص من الإجراءات غير الضرورية مع تحسين الخدمات والمنتجات المقدمة، كذلك زيادة العائد المادي عن طريق تسويق المنتجات والخدمات بفعالية أكثر، وتنسيق أنشطة المنظمة المختلفة والاستثمار الأمثل لمعارفها على اختلاف هذه المعارف. ومن هنا يتشكل تميز المؤسسة ونجاحها نتيجة الإدارة الواعية والناضجة لمعارفها، سواء كانت هذه المعارف صريحة explicit أو ضمنية implicit. كان من الطبيعي وكما عودناكم في فعاليات والندوات التي تنظمها أكاديمية نسيج أن نستضيف خبيرا في المجال. ومعي ومعكم للحديث حول موضوع اليوم مستر سكوت ليب، استشاري أول لدى مؤسسة أينو الرائدة في مجال إدارة المعرفة. وتنبع خبرات مستر سكوت من قيادته لمهام ووظائف إدارة المعرفة وذكاء الأعمال ل4 شركات تعد من أكبر 500 شركة في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وفقا لتصنيف مجلة فورشن 500. وتشمل مجالات خبراته الواسعة إدارة المعرفة والبيانات الضخمة، تحليل البيانات أو تصوير البيانات أو تصور البيانات visualization طبعا، والتنقيب عن البيانات وإنترنت الأشياء والذكاء الاصطناعي، وأخيرا وليس آخرا شات جي بي تي، محور اهتمام الكثير منا، وكيف يمكن أن يؤثر إيجابا على إدارة المعرفة مثل كثير من التقنيات الحديثة الوفود. ويسعدنا في أن يشاركنا سكوت خبراته التي شكلت ليس فقط في عمله ولكن أيضا من خلال خبراته التي عرضها في كثير من الفعاليات والكلمات الرئيسة في المؤتمرات. وهو حاصل على بكالوريوس من جامعة ييل وشهادة في اللغة من جامعة بكين، وحصل على الماجستير من جامعة استراليا الوطنية وجامعة كولومبيا، فهو ثري من حيث المعارف والخبرات. وسوف يتحدث حول مجموعة من العناصر والموضوعات الفرعية، منها التعريف بإدارة المعرفة كمفهوم، وكيف يمكن أن يميز بين معارف ومصطلحات أخرى كإدارة المحتوى أو ما شابه ذلك. أيضا سيبرز الدور الحيوي لإدارة المعرفة في إنجاح الأعمال. سيناقش مستويات نضج المؤسسات maturity levels في إدارة المعرفة وكيف يمكن قياس ذلك. ثم أخيرا يعرج على تقنيات الناشئة والذكاء الاصطناعي وتطبيقات الشات جي بي تي وغير ذلك من التقنيات التي تفعل دور إدارة المعرفة المؤسسة وتعلي من قدرتها على التميز والنجاح. Mr. Scott, this was a brief introduction to you and to the webinar. I know it's a very challengeable opportunity for me to talk about your long history. And now the virtual stage is yours, and you can start your presentation. Small announcement, I will say it again in Arabic, not to forget it. كما عهدنا في ويبنارات والندوات العلمية في أكاديمية نسيج، جميع الأسئلة سيتم تلقيها عبر صندوق الأسئلة والاستفسارات question and answer box and also عبر الشات. ولمن يريد أن يستمع إلى الندوة باللغة العربية يمكنه الضغط على الرمز الخاص بالكرة الأرضية ويختار القناة التي باللغة العربية للترجمة الفورية. Thank you again as a introduction to you this webinar. Thank you again, Mr. Scott, and we all waiting to hear from you about the knowledge management and the effect of ChatGPT on this warm, hot topic. Please.
Great. Salam alaikum. And thank you all for being on this call today. And thank you to Naseej for allowing me, the Naseej Academy, for allowing me to speak on this important subject of how knowledge management promotes organizational excellence and success. I encourage you to use the chat if you have questions. If there's questions that we need to address in context, I will, but in general, I will work with Dr. Madwali and to answer the questions at the end of the session. And my plan is to speak for about 60 minutes or so, about an hour, and then leave the last 30 minutes open to questions. As Dr. Madwali mentioned, I have been in knowledge management for about 25 years, working for the government, working as a consultant, creating and running functions, serving as an advisor to the Saudi government, the US government, all in the space of knowledge management. So I believe I can bring a number of multiple perspectives to this issue of how knowledge management really drives organizational excellence and success. And let me just say at the outset, at the beginning, my general theme is that all these changes in technology, and I'm not talking about just generative AI in general or ChatGPT in specific, but these changes are all about making value from greater and greater amounts of data. And that's really what knowledge management is all about. So I really see this as a great time, a golden era for knowledge management. So what I wanted to begin with, just quickly, the agenda here is to talk a bit about first off, what knowledge management is. It means many things to many people, but I want for this discussion to have a standard understanding of what knowledge management is. And then, why are we here? Why is knowledge management critical to business success? I want to talk about how you measure success of knowledge management through a maturity model and describe how to go about measuring it. And then I wanted to turn to the topic of how knowledge management really works with the emerging technologies such as generative AI, ChatGPT, and other alternatives. So with that, let's begin. So what is knowledge management? Well, I can begin with a textbook definition of what knowledge management is. It's the collection of methods relating to creating, sharing, using, and managing the knowledge and information of an organization. Now, you hear that definition, and it doesn't really tell you much. I prefer the definition that you see on the screen. Knowledge management is about getting the right intelligence to the right person at the right time, in the right format, to make the right decision or provide the right advice. So let's talk about this a bit. Getting the right intelligence. You'll see on the next slide, it's not the right data. It's not the right information. It's the right intelligence. Knowledge management is about getting high value information, that is intelligence, to the individual. It has to go to the right person, and it has to be at the right time. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with instances where you've taken training in your organizations and you've learned, let's say, how to use Excel, and you've learned how to use a pivot table. And then you don't use it for 6-9 months. Suddenly your boss comes to you and says, I need this information. It needs to be in a pivot table. And you sort of scratch your head and say, oh, I remember hearing about that. What did I learn? Well, that's what I mean by right time. It's the ability to get that information when you need it. Having the best information in a database is not of value unless you can access it at the point in time you need it. And it needs to be in the right format. Look, people consume information in all different ways. I've worked with a number of organizations as a consultant where you needed to make sure that the information was mobile friendly. You needed to make sure that it included audio, it included video. So understanding how the audience consumes information is part of knowledge management as well. And then the bottom line is, all knowledge management is about is helping you make better decisions. It's to improve your decision making, or if you're in the advisory business, give you the right advice to help others make decisions. So that's when we think about knowledge management. To me, that is the definition of knowledge management. So let's spend a minute in talking about knowledge management at work. If you remember from the previous slide, I made a point of saying knowledge management is all about the right intelligence. Well, there's a hierarchy of data, information, and intelligence that you see on this screen. And I'll use, for example, this presentation. So what is data? Data would be 7:30 p.m., 90 minutes, knowledge management, Nasij Academy. That's just a collection of data, facts, numbers, statistics. Doesn't really mean anything. But once you have the data and you begin to organize it and interpret it, then it becomes information. So for example, add to that Scott Leeb. So you see Scott Leeb, you now know it's a presentation. It's at 7:30 p.m. It's for an hour and a half. It's on the topic of knowledge management. So you're beginning to organize that. And then finally, intelligence, the highest level, is where you turn it into something actionable. For example, you also note, oh, we're going to talk about ChatGPT, or we're going to talk about knowledge management. This is important to me, so you contextualize it. You see Scott Leeb, maybe you go to LinkedIn, or you read my bio. You see that I've been doing this for a long time. So you say to yourself, okay, the actionable information is, I want to attend this. You've now turned all the data into information, into intelligence to make your decision. Your decision was, and I thank you for it, to be here this evening to hear and talk about knowledge management and new technologies. Now, that's the intelligence. What's the knowledge? The knowledge is how you apply the intelligence, what you've learned. So, for example, Dr. Metwali has previously invited me here to Nasij Academy. His experience with me presenting has been favorable. So he has asked me to once again give a presentation. So that's knowledge. And so this is your pyramid. It moves from just data where you're organizing, collecting, to information where you begin analyzing, to decision making, where you actually turn it into something useful. It's actionable. As we said on the previous slide, knowledge management is about intelligence. It's about making the right decision. It's about decision making. And knowledge is above intelligence. You take all that intelligence and you draw inferences from it. You draw experiences from it. So let's talk about the knowledge cycle and the 6 parts to knowledge management. Well, the first part is about capturing and collecting information. You can capture primary, that is through discussions with your source. You can capture secondary. You now can capture text. Increasingly with the new tools, you can capture audio, video. Before you could always have the PowerPoint, you could have the audio tapes, but now you can actually search audio for keywords. The audio is turned into text, and you can search much like you would in a document. Video as well. And please, I understand this is a lot of information. At the end of this presentation, I'm more than happy to share the slides with you, so you don't need to take notes. You can just sit and listen, and you'll have all the slides afterwards. So that's the first step, capturing, collecting the information. It used to be that you could only capture information. It was what was in structured data, that is in tables, in databases. You couldn't capture unstructured or analyze unstructured data like emails. Now you can analyze that information. Once you capture the information, you organize it and you enrich it. You organize it, you add metadata to it. This is an article about X, Y, and Z. These are the key people mentioned. You do that so when someone searches, it is easier for them to find it. You create structures or taxonomies. In essence, you're taking the raw data that you've captured and collected, and you're organizing it so it adds up to something else. So on our previous slide, we talked about data. That's number one. Number two is turning it into information. Number three is the intelligence. You're actually analyzing it. You're sense making around it. And how does one do this? Well, we now have big data tools. We have Tableau. We have other data analytic tools. And there's models we can use to help us analyze and think critically about the information. So that's analyzed. Then there's storing the information. Where does one store the information? Is it on the cloud? Is it on premise? Structured versus unstructured. You have to think about how people access the information, and that determines how you store it. Do you push it to people, such as regular reports, or do you just put the reports there and make it available? There's a saying, an old Chinese saying, if you give a man a fish, he has dinner. If you teach him to fish, he has dinner for a lifetime. And I often use that and think about that when I think about knowledge management and distributing information. Putting all the information out there for you to retrieve and use is teaching you the skills to fish. If we just push information to you, it's like giving you the fish for dinner. You don't learn as much. And so oftentimes knowledge management is about creating those environments, the self-help environments where people can pull the information directly. And then finally, it's updating the information. And as you get new information, you start the cycle again. So you can see you update the information, how, certain information is time sensitive. It should not be kept in your databases. It's no longer current. So you need to clean that data. You need to figure out how often you have to update and what your gaps are. And then once you determine those gaps, you go out and collect and capture, and you start the process right now. And then you continue. And so that's how the circle works. It's interesting as I think about capturing and collecting and organizing and enriching. My daughter, when they were young, would always ask me, Scott, or Dad, what is it that you do? Can you explain knowledge management? And I would explain it to them and they'd say they understood it. And then a week later, they would come back and say, Dad, can you explain again what you do? So I said to them, think about a library. When you go into a library, you go to the librarian or you go to the computer to find out where the information is. And it will tell you 817.6 or whatever the system is, it will tell you where it is, and then you can find it. Well, that's what knowledge management does. In many organizations, you would go to the desk and ask for help, and they would just say, the information's back there. You have to find it. Well, knowledge management helps organize, helps structure that so that you can easily find it. When you need to find a book, when you need to find a resource, you know what the number is corresponding to it, and you can easily find it. And so that's a very easy way of thinking about what knowledge management does and how it really helps organize great amounts of data. So that's great. Now that you understand what knowledge management is, what is the critical need for knowledge management? And here are some of the benefits that we see. Look, the benefits are pretty straightforward. Shortened business process cycle times. Well, if you have more information at your fingertips and you can access that information, what does that, how does that allow you to do your work quicker? You have better information at your fingertips, quicker. You can make faster decisions. You can respond to business issues much faster. You can access knowledge resources faster. So these are all obvious what the tangible benefits are. Reduce mistakes and rework. Look, computers don't make mistakes. It's the people that program them that make the mistakes. Computers don't get tired. They can continue to run. So mistakes are reduced, rework is lessened. These are all tangible benefits, but I'd like to focus on what some of the intangible benefits are. Well, how do you make higher quality decisions? So there's a statement, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If you have great information, great intelligence coming in, you're going to get great results coming out. You have better decision-making because there's less white noise. You know, I'll talk about a bit about it more. There's so much data out there, but knowledge management helps sort through that data, helps sort through the information to really get you to the intelligence, which is the information, which is the data, the information you need to make decisions. Increased innovation. When you think about innovation, innovation at its core is about connecting dots in a new way. And what knowledge management does is give you more dots. It gives you more information. So people have more dots to make the connections for innovation. So it helps increase innovation. Engages people at every level. New information, new data, new intelligence is there. People are more engaged. It's easier to align thinking and action because the data is out there, it's understood, it's easy to understand. So these are some of the tangible benefits as well as the intangible benefits. So knowledge management maturity, thinking about your current knowledge management function and where it is. So what is a maturity model? In essence, a maturity model is thinking about where you are today from a knowledge management standpoint, where you want to get to. And the model is a way of mapping and understanding your current capabilities and understanding what actions you need to take to move to that next level. And that next level might be your final stop where you'd like the organization to be, or it could be an interim stop. And I've listed a few of the popular models here. You're probably familiar with Gartner, an IT consulting firm. They have a knowledge management maturity model. APQC, which is one of the premier thinkers of knowledge management. They have a maturity model as well, which I've used in the past. It's excellent. And the common knowledge maturity model, you'll see that each of them, not all of them do, but each of these have 5 steps. So I've developed my own maturity model over the years from my analysis and thinking about organizations and how they think about knowledge management. So let me spend a minute talking about knowledge management and the maturity model. As I said, it's a journey. And you see here the 5 levels, but in fact, there's 6. Many organizations are at level 0. As a consultant, I have been called into many organizations to help them out. And what they fundamentally recognize is that they were a small organization. They started as a small organization, and some of their approaches to knowledge management, how they coordinated, how they collaborated, where they stored their information, was great when you had 5 or 10 people. You could talk to each other, you knew each other. You know, from an expertise standpoint, you sort of knew everybody in the firm. But as organizations grew to hundreds, multiple hundreds of people, those approaches, those basic approaches fell apart. Simple things like, you know, naming conventions for documents. An interesting statistic, the 3 most popular names for documents are Doc 1, Doc 2, and Doc 3, because they mean something to somebody who saves them. But if you come across it, you have no idea what that information is. So simple things like having a naming convention for documents, even if you had it in different places, so people could recognize right away what the information is. You know, some organizations didn't even have that. They were at level 0. But at least at level 1, and I should say before going on, not everybody, level 5 is world-class knowledge management. Not every organization needs to be at level 5, nor does every organization want to be at level 5. Many, I would say most organizations strive to be at level 3. And in many cases, they never make it beyond level 2. So this is a model, but it's not you have to go from 1 to 5. It's about understanding your organization, understanding your culture. And I can tell you, as someone who's been in knowledge management for 25 years, there's about 5 or 6 common problems. And if you're interested, we could talk about them in the discussion. Every organization has the same problems. The difference is how the culture addresses them. That's the key challenge, is the cultural elements. And the same is true here with your journey as you go to level 1, level 2, and level 3, and 4 and 5. Start with level 1. Level 1 is the recognition that you need knowledge management. And it basically comes from, many times it comes from a problem because data wasn't read correctly, data wasn't entered, data was missing, and people recognize we really have to manage our knowledge better. We need new practices. And so that's level 1, understanding the need for knowledge management. Level 2 is about putting approaches in place, putting processes in place for knowledge management. So for example, working with a department, helping them organize their data, helping them develop a naming structure. And the way it generally grows at organizations is you build 1 or 2 use cases, you show the value of those use cases, and then you promote those use cases across the organization. Because you can tell people to use a naming convention, and some will do it. But if you show them the value, for example, give an example of someone who was looking for a document, they needed it for a deal, and they couldn't find it, and it cost the company $1 million, you know, 10 million $10 million. It's you know, that will resonate a lot more. People will understand it a lot better if it's something that they can relate to. So it's level 2 is about finding finding use cases within organizations to help build the knowledge base. And then level 3 is about standardizing and focusing on requirements, results, developing infrastructure. So it's really building out. So from 1 department, building out to 2 departments, maybe building out for a region, building and then sort of building up piece by piece. And that's level 3. And as I said, many organizations were happy with that. But at level 4, you start to get where organizations, you know, are focused on KM, have a function, it's handled at a global level or national level, and all the processes are pushed throughout the organization. And then level 5 is about putting practices in place, and people basically, instead of doing KM and they see it as time consuming, you do knowledge management not to take up time, but you do knowledge management so you have time. At level 4 and 5, knowledge management is seen as a productivity tool. For levels 1, 2, and 3, it's sort of seen as work I have to do this, do that. But by level 4 and level 5, you begin to recognize that knowledge management is a productivity tool, much like the other tools that you use. I saw a question about knowledge management, information management, and data management, and I will talk a bit about that at the end. But now I wanted to turn for the last half of the presentation, really talk about knowledge management and emerging technologies. You know, many of these technologies we've seen or you've heard about. These are the big technologies likely to, you know, really dominate discussion over the next decade or so. Again, you've probably heard of some of them. RPA is around now, 5G for sure, but you might not have heard of sort of the Internet of Behaviors, the IOB. You've heard of the Internet of Things. Well, the Internet of Behavior is the collection and use of data to drive behavior. So for example, I wear my Apple Watch, and I can tell you at the end of every day, it tells me how many steps I still need to do, or how many, you know, I've met my goal for the day. So it's driving my behavior to exercise more, to walk more. There's new refrigerators that tell you when something's low. You need to go, you know, you're low on milk, you need to buy milk, or your head of lettuce is wilting, you need to eat that. So it's this Internet of Behavior, and how new technologies, new devices, which collect data, interpret that and shape your behavior. Other things, zero trust. That's a security framework that's developing, where it's constantly determining and authenticating. You know, a lot of times you enter your password. Maybe there's a two-step authentication. You get a code on your phone, and you have to type it in. This traditional two-step authentication. Well, zero trust is a consistent authentication in the back, and oftentimes running in the background, authenticating and re-authenticating your use. Edge computing. This is the use of multiple computers to help improve response time and save bandwidth. So it's about smart computers getting together and distributing work so that that computing can be done more effectively. So that's, you know, these are some of the broad technologies. But in a broad category, we've heard of the origins of the fourth industrial revolution. So let's spend a minute. What is the fourth industrial revolution? Well, this idea came about, it was very popular started in 2015 in an article published in Foreign Affairs. And it became a theme, as you can see here, for the 2016 World Economic Forum. And it was put forward by Klaus Schwab. And it really represents the automation of traditional manufacturing and industrial practices using smart technology. So taking what we've been doing for many years, manufacturing and our practices, and making it smarter. It's about hardware, software, and biology all coming together and communicating, and connectivity between them. You know, it's about machine to machine. You know, machines can now talk to each other. Integrated automation, improved communication, self-monitoring, smart machines, which we talked about with the IOB. And look, machines now can diagnose problems without human intervention. The question becomes, are we still going to need humans? I will answer that later. The answer is most assuredly yes. And I'll show you some of the technology associated with this. But in 2016, Klaus Schwab said it's going to be marked by breakthrough emerging technologies. And I really think that, and we'll talk about in a bit, the generative AI is a good example of this, but there's plenty other examples. So let's talk about the Industrial Revolution. As I said, it blurs the lines between the physical, digital, and biological worlds. The first Industrial Revolution moved from hand production to production by machines, use of steam power, use of water power. And this was in the 1700s, and that changed how work was done. The second was the Industrial Revolution. You had the inventions of electricity. You had the telephone, railroad. So now people could communicate with each other. The telephone, railroad, people could get from point A to point B. No longer were you bound by limited geography. You could travel. Now, with all this new technology, it also caused an increase in productivity, which led, unfortunately, to unemployment, as many factory workers began to be replaced by machines. And so this was this second industrial revolution was a great period of innovation, as is the third industrial revolution. This was really between the two world wars, the 1940s to 1910 to about 1945, 1950. And the introduction of the computer really kicked off this era, and obviously the rise of supercomputing in the 1900s, the spread of computers. So the as you see, it falls neatly into the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s, and now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, and that's what we'll talk about on the next slide. So you can see how it has progressed over time. So how do we think about the industrial evolution, fourth industrial evolution? Let's talk about the world by numbers. We said the digital world, the virtual world, and the physical world. In 2021, a friend of mine and his friend wanted to go from drive across the United States from New York to California. That's about 5,000 kilometers. They'd been planning this for a long time. They were two buddies. Unfortunately, COVID came. They couldn't do it in the real world. So what they did was they went online, and using virtual reality, they were able to simulate driving in a car together. They could see the scenery as it went by. And as they came into cities, they said, oh, I want to visit this museum. They were able to take virtual tours. Not only were they able to take virtual tours, but there were others taking virtual tours, and they could engage with them in conversation. So was it the same as the windows down, sitting with your buddy in a car driving cross country? No, but a great deal of it was able to be replicated by mixing the virtual world with the digital world, yet giving the physical world experience. They would sit in a car, they would talk to each other, the scenery would go by. They could stop and pull off at scenic sites to take looks, to snap pictures. So they were able to replicate that experience. So those are the three worlds. What are the five dynamics? We talk about technology advancement. A number of years ago, even 5-6 years ago, drones were used only by the government. Now, in the United States, Amazon uses drones to deliver goods to residences. Look, new sources of growth and inequality. Unfortunately, as technology evolves, you have a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots. An example of this is government services during COVID. Well, offices closed, so governments had to still help the people. But if they didn't have the infrastructure, connectivity in place, the e-government in place, countries suffered. So those that had it in place continued to grow. Those that didn't were greatly harmed. So you see this growth because of technology, greater and greater sources of inequality. Tech cost and investment. I was reading the other day that it was 50 years ago the mobile phone was invented. The first mobile phone was $3,500, weighed 15 pounds, and was this big. Now, for under $1,000, you have a phone this big that has an infinite more computing and thinking capability and can do so much more than just talking. So tech costs and investment are going down. Convergence, we talked about. And then here are some of the technologies, biotech, supercomputing. We're moving towards something called exascale computing. It's a huge number of computations per second. We've seen artificial intelligence we'll talk about in a minute, the Internet of Things, biotechnology, 3D printing. There is now a store in California you can go into, order your car, and it's printed in 3D. And you can come back, I think, in a day or so, and your car is ready. Just amazing. But you see on this slide, accelerated rate of change. This slide is very interesting. In 1918, the first flight took place. It was 23 minutes, 23 miles, and it went 15 feet over a bay in Florida in the United States, probably very scary. But from that first flight, it took 68 years to reach 50 million flyers, 50 million flights. Contrast this to July 6, 2016, the introduction of Pokemon Go. It reached 50 million users in 19 days. Airlines took 68 years. Pokemon Go took 19 days. Think about that from technology adoption. And I'll give you a statistic on ChatGPT in a moment that is even more impressive than this. Many of you, for those who don't know, Pokemon Go was about, it married mobile devices with GPS. So wherever you were, you could locate, capture, train, and battle virtual creatures called Pokemon, and they appeared in your real world. So if you were walking through a park, the creature would appear there and you could battle and fight it. But again, it's about, in this day and age, new technology, how quickly new technology is adopted. It's just amazing. So we saw this before. This is the knowledge management cycle. So what does this mean for knowledge management? Look, there's so much data out there. If any of you have heard a presentation I've previously given about big data, there's about 1.7 megabytes of new information created every second for every person on Earth. 7 billion people on Earth means that there's about 12 billion megabytes of data created every second. It used to be when I was in college, I had a 20 gig hard drive. We went from gigs, terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, zettabytes, yottabytes, zenatabytes, shalenobytes, domigromabytes, numbers just bigger and bigger just to capture all the data. And somehow that's got to be managed. And that's what knowledge management is all about. Someone asked earlier the difference between that and data management. Data management is more around how data flows. Knowledge management is about taking data, converting it, organizing it, enriching it, storing it in a way that it can be used, distributing it, and then updating it. And so what does this mean? Well, for organizing and enriching, we now have tools to auto-categorize, whereas before we would have to manually organize. Now there's taxonomies that can be organized, auto-categorization. It's much easier. With so much data, we can't be spending time manually organizing and enriching it. There's tools in place that help you organize and enrich the information. There's tools that help you analyze. You have knowledge graphs, data visualization, augmented analytic platforms. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, I say an infographic is worth 1,000 pictures. And an infographic, you take large amounts of data, you distill it into pictures, you analyze the data. There's numbers, that's analyzing the numbers. There's ways to analyze the words, synthesize those. There's analytic platforms to help. Searching the data. As I said before, you couldn't search video files, you couldn't search audio files. You could find that there was an audio file there, and you'd have to listen to the whole audio file to get maybe the 10 seconds you wanted out of it. Now you can search. They have the tools. So the, knowledge management in the fourth industrial revolution is about sensibly and smartly capturing all the big data and really turning it into big intelligence, the right intelligence, so that you can use it at the right time to make the right decisions. Okay, emerging technology. You want to spend the last 15 minutes talking about emerging technology and generative AI. And I imagine this is what most of you are most interested in, how generative AI is going to impact knowledge management, and in fact, impact our lives. So the question becomes, and many have asked, is generative AI an evolution or a revolution? Is it a natural growth from things we've been doing, or is it something new? Now, I would argue that generative AI has been around for some time. You have it in Microsoft Word. If you use the spell checker, that's generative AI. It looks at your word, it looks against a defined database of words, and it estimates what it thinks is your best, the best word. So, generative AI has been around for quite some time. The difference is that it's now usable in a much more human-friendly fashion, and we will talk about that next. So what is generative AI? Well, generative AI is about using algorithms, large language models that can be used to create new content, including code, images, text, video. And recent breakthroughs in the field have made it much easier to approach the content, because ChatGPT. So what is ChatGPT? ChatGPT, and by the way, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's an advanced AI tool which allows, it uses technology that can generate natural language responses to queries. That's what's different. The generative AI, ChatGPT, and the other tools I'll talk about, is that they create human-like conversations. If you've used ChatGPT, you can see that you ask it a question as if you and I were speaking. You don't need to use specific operands, to use the computer language term, to ask the questions. You just speak it naturally. And to a large extent, early versions of this AI human-like conversation chatbots are much like this. And you see here already Goldman Sachs has said that this could lead to significant disruption of around 300 million full-time jobs globally. Administrative positions, legal positions, engineering jobs could be replaced by this artificial intelligence. I will say there's been statements like this before, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So what is ChatGPT now specifically? Well, ChatGPT is a conversational robot, and it's capable of understanding and answering questions as you ask them. The key is in natural language. And it's learned from, I think, 300 billion documents fed into algorithms and then supplemented by human intervention. And that's very important. It's based off human learning. That's how ChatGPT gets smarter. So you saw some of the data before. ChatGPT reached 1 million users in 5 days. So we saw 50 million users on an airplane took 68 years. Pokemon took 19 days. ChatGPT, 5 days. It is, according to analysis, the fastest growing app of all time. It estimated that it had 100 million users in January, only 2 months after its launch. For example, by comparison, TikTok, very popular, especially with my kids, took 9 months for TikTok to reach 100 million users. ChatGPT cut that by 90%, did it in, or cut that by 80%, did that in 2 months. So is ChatGPT a big deal? Yes, without a doubt. So what can ChatGPT do? Well, your input, if you played around natural language, you can ask questions as if you were speaking. You can input structured data. You could ask it to analyze a table or an Excel spreadsheet. Multilingual. ChatGPT knows at least 95 languages. And those languages include programming and code languages such as Python and JavaScript. You can put images into ChatGPT and ask it, what does this picture mean? Try doing that with some abstract art and see what it says. But it is able to understand and analyze images. And so what does it do? It can generate text. It can generate code. In fact, I know many people that use it for coding purposes. They'll input some code and say, where's the error? And it can run and determine where the errors are, or you can run it and see results and do analysis. But it's able to look at, it's able to generate code. In other words, you could say something like, I am trying to write a program to do X. Can you write it in JavaScript? And it can create the code. It can complete text, fill in the blank. It can classify text. It can summarize text. It can translate. Again, I can put in something in French and it can turn it to English. I do not know about Arabic, but it has the ability to translate in 95 natural languages. Sentiment analysis. It can tell you, it can say, is this article positive? Is this negative? Is it neutral? Or any shade thereof. It can correct text. It can manipulate text. It can do named entity recognition. For those that don't use named entity recognition is locating and classifying names or entities in a text. So for example, if I talked about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it would classify Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as a country. And then I might talk about has immigration laws. It would classify that as legal issues. And it would so it can do and named entity recognition. It can certainly answer questions. It could translate style. I've seen people play around with, write me a 16-line poem on happiness. So it can turn this text into a poem, things like that. And the output is natural language, easy to understand. It can come out as structured data. You put a table in, create a table for me. Multilingual, it can go in as English, come out as French or Chinese, or computer code. Solve this problem. How would I solve this problem in JavaScript? And it will write the code for you. So it's just amazing stuff that ChatGPT can do. So what are some of the challenges? And there are many challenges. Confidentiality and privacy. Well, ChatGPT is a public AI tool. And to improve its documents, it's constantly collecting information. And that information, you could ask a question and the information it generates then becomes part of its public knowledge base. That's part of the way that it learns. So for example, something that ChatGPT learns from you by doing a query could then be turned around if your competitor had a question and could use that. So I'll use an example. I've been working with a law firm recently. And if the law firm asks a question about how to handle a sticky immigration case, and it types in all the parameters, ChatGPT would learn. And what that would mean is theoretically a competitor could, at some point in the future, type in that query and it would get the answer from what, the work that you had done. So there's confidentiality and privacy issues. Hallucinations. I don't know if everybody has heard this term, but hallucinations refers to the ability to confidently make things up. And what I mean by that is if you ask ChatGPT for someone's bio, it sounds very authoritative, but in many cases it's wrong. And the algorithm is such that hallucinations occur. And hallucinations occur about 20% of the time. And this is from the head of OpenAI, has said AI systems create something that look very convincing, but have no basis in the real world. So it sounds authoritative, yet it isn't. Bias. Depending on what sources you're pulling from. If you're pulling from government sources, you're pulling from independent sources, you're pulling from within the government, outside the government, it's only going to be as smart as the sources that are fed into it. So making sure that bias doesn't exist is a big challenge. Accuracy. You've probably seen the reports. It's passed the U.S. bar. It's taken all these European tests. It passes, but it doesn't score 100%. And in some industries like legal or others, there's a high risk if you're not 100% accurate. And for those of you who use ChatGPT 4, accuracy is much better than 3.5, but it's not 100%. And also, if you ask it to do some research for you, which many people do, no source is given. I mean, I know my daughter, when she was in college, they wouldn't let her use Wikipedia, stated as a source, because you couldn't really get to the source. Wikipedia was just an aggregation of information. Well, the same is true here, especially say, for example, in legal, you have to source. The client's entitled to know the source of the information, and you need to check it. Well, you can't. I mean, it's ChatGPT is not a source. And so accuracy is getting better and better, and there's ways to improve it, but it's still not at 100%. And finally, security. Look, it's open information. It's much like misinformation. If somebody feeds misinformation or disinformation, which is purposely wrong information, then ChatGPT will absorb that information and reflect it. They did a test with this on learning for autonomous vehicles, an early use of AI. And what somebody tested was they put in a code, malicious code, that said when the light is, the first 5 seconds a light is red, you can actually go. And they fed that in, and because it's called data poisoning. That's the term used. They data poisoned that. So how it learned was that the cars would drive autonomously, and when it was a red light, they would accelerate for the first 5 seconds. And so, security and making sure your data is secure is a critical challenge with ChatGPT, but it's getting better. All of it is getting better. So just a couple more slides. So what's next? Look, what's its impact on knowledge management? Well, it provides instant access to vast amounts of information. And what function in your organization makes sense of vast amounts of information? Well, that's knowledge management. So that's the growth in the data. First there was big data. Now there's AI, which is making big data more readily, more quicker available. How is that handled? Knowledge management. Communication and collaboration. ChatGPT can facilitate communication and collaboration between team members by providing them with a common platform to exchange and share ideas. Automating mundane tasks. How do people use ChatGPT now? Many people have to write common letters. ChatGPT is a great way, at least to start with, to write a letter. You feed in the right information, and it provides, it can provide you a letter. The user experience can be personalized. It can facilitate training. ChatGPT can personalize the user experience by understanding the context of your conversation, tailoring your conversation to your needs, to your preferences. You can tell it, I need a response as if it was provided by a fifth grader. So it won't use certain words, for example. But what I think the biggest thing is this last one, skill shift. So people ask, is this going to be like the movie Terminator, where we're all going to be replaced by robots? And my answer is no, it's not like that. It's about skill shifts. For example, there is a new term that, it's going to be a huge skill in the next year. You're going to hear a lot about it. It's called a prompt engineer. Because to get good answers out of ChatGPT or any of these generative AI tools, you need to write the correct prompt. That is the right question. So phrasing the question right, interpreting the data. So data scientists, data ethicists, those that look at the ethics of confidentiality and how the data is being used. It's a skill shift. It's certain jobs will be put out of certain jobs will be eliminated, but people can be reskilled to address these data needs, the prompt engineer, the data scientist, the data ethicist. The way to think about it, in my opinion, is about something called, in communications, you have the last mile. That's when all the information flows through the television station, the radio, whomever, their network, and then that last little bit where it goes into your house. They call it the last mile. Or think the last kilometer. Well, I think that with these AI tools, instead of the last kilometer, it's now the last meter. It's just that last bit. What the AI tools, generative AI and other tools are doing is getting you better information faster in your hands. And knowledge management is the vehicle that's getting that information to you. So you're always going to need that last little bit, the human intervention. But what's happening is you're getting stronger data, better data at the end, so you can make better decisions. You can make better decisions quicker. You're getting to the point where you have what they call 100% situational awareness. You have all the information you need. You're not finding a needle in a haystack. The needle is coming to you, and it's your job to interpret that needle to make sense of it. So I just wanted to end with this. This is the AI landscape. ChatGPT isn't the only tool out there. Google has something called Bard, which is their AI tool. The difference is Bard pulls from the internet, whereas ChatGPT, one of the problems is the data set ends in September of 2021. Bard pulls from the internet, so it can answer. If you go into ChatGPT and ask, who won the World Cup in 2022? The response ChatGPT will tell you is, I can't answer that because my data ends in September of 2021. Whereas Bard could answer that. Baidu, which is the Chinese search engine, they have a AI tool, Ernie Bot. But this is just text, images, audio, video. All these tools are AI tools, which I can generate now PowerPoint presentations. Truth in advertising, this presentation was not created with ChatGPT, but there are tools out there where I could say, I want these images, I want to talk about this topic, and I could generate this presentation. Audio files, audio to text files, video. There is a tool where it says, give me a picture of an astronaut on a horse. And it's a beautiful picture of an astronaut on a horse. Just amazing things can be done with the video and audio. And just to end, what I think the big difference here is, what you're going to see is not so much the use of ChatGPT and the tools by themselves, but the tools integrated into your productivity tools, like your Microsoft Word, your Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint. What do I mean by that? So for example, if you're writing, if many of you have done doing a PowerPoint slide deck, you'll often see as you start a slide, it'll give you various suggestions about formats. Do you want it to look like this? Well, if there was an AI plugin, it could say, how about this graphic? Or what about this text? It wouldn't just be, oh, do you like blue colors with red colors with blue, green with red? It can offer up images. It can offer up audio. It can even recommend, video to be included. I have seen there is a tool out there where you create text and the AI tool creates a counter text. So if you're putting together like a lawyer an argument, it'll tell you what the counter argument is. I mean, it's just amazing uses of this. And that's where I see this tool going. It's not going to be a standalone tool, but it's going to be integrated into your workflow. Certainly people will go to ChatGPT and use it as a standalone, but we're already seeing with Microsoft, they have it integrated into their search engine, into Bing. They're integrating into Azure. They're integrating into all of their products. And that's where I think the real power is going to be. But the bottom line is that this tool is going to change how we do our work. And by our work, I mean knowledge management. And it's only going to help and enhance the importance of knowledge management. Now, that being said, knowledge managers are going to need new skills to address this. But the function of knowledge management is going to become central as generative AI tools become more and more prominent. So with that, I have been speaking for about an hour, but I want to hear from you. I am happy to answer any questions or inquiries which you have. So Dr. Mawali, back to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Scott. I think as I used to attend your speech or webinar, I really had this interesting, amazing time listening to you, how you simplifying the very complicated issues and say it very loudly, but I know that it's not as easy as you presented because there is a huge experience and knowledge behind what you deliver here. So thank you for this informative presentation, which I trust it helped many of the attendees to understand indeed the concept of the knowledge management, the characteristics and the aspects of it. Also, you have this technological touch about the Internet of Things and ChatGPT and how this will affect aggressively, I guess, on the knowledge management, understanding and also processes. So thank you again, and let's take the advantage of the time and go for the first question, which has come from Ms. Radwa, and I guess this is what we call it the $1 million question. It's saying that how we can explain to the organization about the importance of knowledge, of having knowledge management department.
Yeah, no, okay. Look, believe me, that's been many of a consulting gig that I have done over time, is showing the value of knowledge management. What the key to showing the value of knowledge management is to really establish use cases for where knowledge management has succeeded, and then what you do is you in essence market those successes, because clearly knowledge management, whether it's known as knowledge management or such, exists within the organization. If it doesn't exist, then you can show where it, if you had done this, look at a problem within the organization and say, well, if you had done it this way, if you had collected this information, if you had this at your fingertips, you could have had a solution quicker. In scientific organizations, a lack of access to information sometimes lengthens research periods. Well, if you had better knowledge management, the researchers would have better data at their fingertips. Better data at their fingertips means quicker response times, meaning products get developed quicker. No longer do you have, ask, if you're in that type of organization, you ask, well, what would happen if you could speed up product to market times by 1 year? How much is that worth? So you need to put it in terms that, not in data terms, because no one's interested in that, but in your, and you have to determine, again, it's about culture, what your business terms are. Make your case, show how knowledge management helps drive better decision making, and then in turn, what does better decision making mean within your organization?
Perfect. Thank you. And I think related, I'm trying to skimming the question and classify it accordingly. Related to that, there is a question about do you have some case studies or examples for a successful organization that already manage their knowledge in a good way? As you know, that this could be best practice or role model for our attendees to follow.
Well, again, there are no shortage of organizations that have done it right. And, you know, I would need some context, because again, I had mentioned earlier that in my 25 years in knowledge management, I have determined that there's only really 5 or 6 key problems that organizations face. The challenge is, how do they solve those problems given their culture? So, you know, to answer that question, I would probably need some understanding of what the culture is of the organization. So, for example, I will use an example in the automotive case. One of the biggest problems we see in knowledge management is tacit knowledge versus explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is what's on paper. Tacit knowledge is what's in people's heads. And so much is in their heads. It's not that they don't want to share it, but they don't know how to share it. I often call this the syndrome, the C drive, the common drive, versus the B drive, the brain drive. How to get it from the brain into the common drive. And you know, all organizations battle with that. How do organizations handle it? I used to work at the Rockefeller Center, Rockefeller Foundation. One of the ways they did that was in the middle of projects, they would stop and you'd have what we called a reflection session, where you would say, okay, let's stop. Is everybody happy with how we're doing this? Are we doing this right? Are we asking the right questions? What questions aren't we asking? If we could do this all over again, how would we do it differently? And pause and reflect and get people to think, so to download the B drive information. Contrast that with Ford Motors in the automobile industry. They had that problem with all their senior people senior people on the floor and the assembly line were retiring, and they didn't want that knowledge to go away. So what we helped them do was to set up what we call chat with the expert sessions, where the junior people would meet once a month or every 2 weeks with a senior person, and they would sit down and talk about, you know, how they did their job, what they focused on, what were the key concerns, what were the key challenges. And that was a way of exchanging information. 2 very different models. And again, it depends on the culture in your organization, but both solving for the same problem of tacit knowledge.
Perfect. Thank you for this good answer. I think we have here another question related to the ChatGPT, and we have many questions related to it.
Yeah.
Let's start with this one. It's about ChatGPT is being very popular. People are using it because it's saving time, effort, and money. But it's being the same source for me and other side of the work of the job. How can we different from the competitors or the other people who use the same source? I think it depends about your experience, but let me hear it from you, Scott.
Yeah, so again, it's, you know, this skill of the prompt engineer. And let me put it in terms perhaps easy to understand. If you go in Google and you search your name without your middle initial, you search your name with your middle initial, you search your name with quotes around it, you're going to get 3 different sets of results.
Yes.
So it's all in how you frame the question. And I would argue that you might say, well, it's a common issue. We're all trying to solve this. But it goes back to, the example I gave. well, pretend, you're in school. Okay, please, smart kids will say, well, write this as if it were a 12-year-old, don't write it like a college PhD, or write it from this perspective, or look at it from this angle. I will tell you what I think in areas like that, in my view, what ChatGPT is best for is it's as an idea generator. Yes, it can answer common questions, common tasks, develop common letters. If you write thank you, I've seen people use it for thank you notes for this, or condolence messages. But I think its value is as an idea generator to kickstart. It's in my view, first and foremost, as a researcher, it's used as a brainstorming tool. So I did see that there is a question in the chat. I would like to ask about the usefulness of ChatGPT in academic research. I think its value in academic research, since you can't go to the source, and academic research is all about sourcing. I use it as an idea generator. Or if you can take academic research and ask, what is a counter argument to this study, and then paste in the study, and it will do that. Or please summarize this. You can put in 4 research reports and ask it to summarize and synthesize and comment on what are the key differences and such. So I use it not as a primary research tool, but I use it to challenge thesis. I use it to develop thesis, to ideate, to raise issues, but not as that's how I would use it in academic research, as a tool to kind of challenge research, analyze research, but not to conduct the actual research.
Stimulating, we can say it, stimulating ideas, and also giving this one.
Well, that's right. I mean, I do some work. I often ask it, what, kind of what are the biggest trends affecting the world today? And obviously that's more of just interesting, but it gives you some idea of issues, and then that leads to lines of inquiry, much like academic research. For academic research, it's about new and exciting lines of inquiry. And if the ChatGPT can open these lines, that's a great value to me, or I would think to academic researchers.
Yes, I think I will get the last word from you, because we have, I think, many questions about it. The effect of ChatGPT on the academic community and also the researcher. So more elaboration will be fine, because the people just now putting the question, getting the information, or just making essay or articles, they're trying to have it. So the humanization, or humanization, if you can say, to add this on the context that we receive.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's used, I would say from an academic standpoint, it's used as, it's not a primary source, but a secondary source. Much like you use LexisNexis as an aggregator to collect information, you would use this as an aggregator. What are some valuable sources to examine these issues? And it provides sources, or what are some of the theories around, current theories around botany, used to just sort of idea generation, and then the academic then pursues much more rigorous academic approaches to it. But it's a great way to stimulate thinking, especially as as friends of mine have said, when they've hit sort of a mental block on a particular issue, putting it into ChatGPT and phrasing it in certain ways oftentimes helps them think or reframe paths of inquiry.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And we have to get a telegraphic answer for the comment, because we have many questions. Let's go back to the knowledge management. Here we have from Muhammad Saleh. Thank you, Mr. Scott, for this such informative session. I would appreciate if you please shed light on what criteria used by an institution to select the appropriate knowledge management maturity. I think it's not selecting, it's measuring, but you will answer this better than me for sure. The maturity level measurements model, and what are the most common models you recommend?
Yeah, so I think the APQC model, which has been built up over the past 20 years,
Yes.
APQC is a benchmarking organization focused on knowledge management. They have been doing the, kind of the knowledge management, this benchmarking maturity model. They built it up over 20 years. I think it's probably the most robust model. I mean, each of the components, there's about 500 components, and they work with you to determine your, the key is understanding what your current state is, and understanding realistically. And that's that I emphasize realistically, because as we go back to the, if we go back to the model I had up before, realistically, leadership might say, well, I want to be best in class, best in the world at, I want to be level 5. But realistically, given resources, given time, level 3 is where you want to get. Okay, so level 3 is standardizing and aligning processes and approaches. Okay, so which processes do you want to align in? Going to be much different if you're in manufacturing than if you're in consulting or telecommunications or fast-moving consumer goods. So it's about, there's a saying that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So you need to know where, what the end game is. What are the processes you want to align to? What are the approaches? And you have to be, the toughest thing is being realistic and, holding the mirror up and saying, okay, we really are at less than level 1. Where do we really want to go? Okay, we do want to get to level 3. Level 4 and 5, given resources, time, for whatever the parameters are, is unrealistic. So judging from that, then you say, okay, here's what we have at level 1. Here's the people, the processes, and the technology we have. What do we need to change to get to level 3? And then you break it out, people, are we staffed right? Do we have the right, are there processes in place? Are the processes just broken? Do we need to develop processes? So it really fundamentally starts with realistically looking at your current state, and where you think you want to get to. And then you can begin to break it down into each of the pieces about what needs to be done and what a realistic time frame for accomplishing that is. Managing expectations in a knowledge management journey is perhaps one of the biggest challenges, because if you don't manage the expectations from the start, you've lost already. So I didn't know, were there other questions? Sorry, Dr. Mawali.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Sorry about this. Okay, so this question related to the knowledge management as well, and this is about the organization culture. He said that Mr. Ahmed Al-Qadi, it's very important factor, and he asking about how to use it in a way that support the knowledge management. He's asking about the organization culture.
So knowledge management is 99% change management. Change management is about the culture. So for example, having the right governance in place, having the right incentives and rewards in place is critical, because you want to obviously reward, and I don't mean monetarily, but reward good behavior, whether it's promotion or such. So you need to understand what motivates people in organizations. I will tell you, in the United States, when I work, it's mostly, we used to put in place programs, and we used to offer gift cards, for the best knowledge management practice that week or month or such. And then when we did a project in Saudi Arabia, what was the incentive? Well, the incentive was, if you could have your, picture taken with His Excellency, that's what motivated people, being able to meet His Excellency, the head of the department, the organization, having your picture taken with him, or having a framed note from him. So it's understanding your rewards an incentive culture and understanding what motivates people and how people react and interact with others. And if you understand that, then you can begin crafting programs that that resonate with them. Because as I said earlier, when you do a pilot, it has to, people have to see it and in some part of their mind say, I can relate to that. If I did that in our group, that would be a positive result. And then what would then encourage them to do that? It might be meeting a team goal. It might be solving a particularly complex problem. But needing to understand the culture and what motivates people, what incents them, what reward structure is in place. And again, I don't want to overemphasize rewards in a monetary sense. There's non-monetary rewards that are just as compelling, but it's going to be different for each organization.
Perfect. I'm trying to collect the question related to the knowledge management. It's something about the application of knowledge management in the non-for-profit organization like university and educational institutions. How different from the for-profit or the company that already seeking for-profit?
Well, so as I mentioned, I was the head of knowledge at a not-for-profit, the Rockefeller Foundation. And look, it's the bottom line is if you're for-profit or not-for-profit, you're trying to achieve results. And there's more and more data out there which can help you achieve those results. And knowledge management is about taking all that data, call it big data out there, turning it into big intelligence, organizing it so people can use it to make decisions. Because that's what, I mean, every organization, whether you're for-profit or not, you want to make the best decisions possible. The best decisions possible depend on having the best knowledge possible. The only way you can have the best knowledge possible is if the information coming into you, the data coming into you is transformed into information and intelligence, and then stored away back to our very first slide. Whatever the organization, whoever the person is, it is in fact all about getting the right intelligence to the right person at the right time in the right format to make the right decision or provide the right advice. Now, that right decision could be purchasing a company for $100 million, or it could be helping refugees get out of the Sudan. But you want to have the best available information at your fingertips so you can make the right decision. And it doesn't matter whether that right decision is for profit, not for profit, or for government.
Okay. I know that the time is running and we have many questions, so I encourage our attendees to send it over the email because we have to stick to the time that we agreed on with Mr. Scott. The last question, one of them, it's about the dark side and also the challenges of the technology within the knowledge management application and how to overcome it. And after you answer this one, I will talk to you about the last one. Please, Scott.
So you're talking about these challenges, the confidentiality, the hallucinations, bias. Look,
how to overcome it.
Yeah, so there's various ways you can overcome them, and there's various ways the technology is overcoming them. I think accuracy, you just saw from ChatGPT to 3.5 to 4, it's improving. Hallucinations are down. Bias can be solved by looking at different resources. But one thing that's not talked about with ChatGPT is, it uses something called a large language model. You can create your own large language model, and it'd be closed system, so you wouldn't have to worry about confidentiality and privacy. You can machine train it, so the accuracy is very good. Hallucinations will be eliminated. Bias would be eliminated. because you're controlling the resources, so you can control the quote unquote bias or lack thereof. The only real open item would be the security. And if you have the appropriate security structure in place, and we talked about zero trust security. So I think that all of these challenges which you're seeing are overcomeable, if there's such a term. Some are due to the technology, and the technology is improving. Others really focus on how you use the technology, because when it comes down to it, generative AI is a tool, like any tool, Microsoft Word, you can create, or PowerPoint. There's people who create beautiful PowerPoint, compelling PowerPoint slides. There's some that don't. It's how well you use it and how well you control it. And there's certainly ChatGPT has the mechanisms and tools in place to overcome these challenges, but they're not, they can't be found out of the box. They would require kind of what they call the human assisted training. They would require, creating your own language, learning model, your own language model. So all of the pieces can be overcome. And I would suggest you think about in technology what they call a hockey stick growth. I would guess in the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to see that hockey stick growth. There are like 100, 200 APIs, AI APIs coming out every day, that tie into various tools like, well, we've seen already with Microsoft. You're seeing more and more of those. And I think the more and more these tools are used, the understanding increases and the ability to overcome the challenges increases. So bottom line is I see wide adoption of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools within the next 6 to 12 months.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think you answered the last question by this extending answer. So it was about your vision for the coming years or months about the ChatGPT and other technologies within the knowledge management context. So thank you so much. We do appreciate your cooperation with Naseej Academy. And again, we encourage our attendees to send their question over the email. The whole presentation will be available on Naseej Academy website after we get this approval from Mr. Scott. And also we're trying to submit the video for this one. Thank you again very much, Mr. Scott, about this very, very interesting and informative webinar. And for sure, we are waiting for you. And I think the attendees also will be happy to have you again in another topic you would like to share it with us. Thank you again. And I would like to thank, before I leave, my colleague Saeed and also the translator, Mr. Salah. And the last word will be yours, Mr. Scott, for our attendees, please.
Well, again, thank you for spending your evening with me. I appreciate it. You have on the screen, you have my email. I'm happy to answer any questions that were not covered here. Happy to continue the conversation. Again, I have done consulting in the knowledge management space. So if you have questions about your organization and such, happy to entertain those questions. And again, Nasij Academy, thank you again for the kind offer to speak on this topic. Hopefully I did it justice, and I would welcome the opportunity to come again in the future to either follow up on this or address another related topic. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we will have you again. Thank you so much. شكرا لجميع الحضور ونراكم في ندوة أخرى من ندوات نسيج أكاديمية نسيج أو نسيج أكاديمية. See you again. Thank you. See you. السلام عليكم.